The number one thing you do as a writer and having a writing process, you have to write a lot and you have to fail a lot and you have to do a lousy job. And then you have to have somebody tell you that it's lousy. And then you have to start over again. And you have to do that several times. That's the most valuable thing I can think of.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Some people see the world in fragments, a news story here, a technology breakthrough there, a social problem over here. But what if somebody could see how all these pieces fit together? What if they could see the pattern everyone else is missing? Today's guest, Randy Swank, has written a novel about exactly that kind of vision. The Solomon Project follows a brilliant programmer and his neurodiverse foster brother who sees connections to the rest of us can't or won't. And it's a story about how ultimate power, uncomfortable truths, and humanity's evolution, and if it can evolve fast enough to save itself. So it's a super exciting book. I'm looking forward to chatting all about it and some writing tips too. So let's dive right in. Randy, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much, Danielle, for having me.
Of course. Yeah, I think this is going to be a really fun conversation. I love your ideas. I love the concept, and I'm looking forward to, just chatting more about it. But before we dive into the book itself, I always do like to get to know our authors a little bit. So tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what led you to your writing mission.
Um, just I've been in business my whole life, and economics, and I had reached the point in my career where I was working for the government and in behavioral health, and it sort of all started to begin to tie things together. A lot of things happened in my personal life where it, taking friends to psychiatrists and psychologists for help, and it was just so very primitive, and there were so many problems. And I thought I'm starting to make a connection between this technology going along so robustly and basically this big underlying problem. And so even though my background is business and economics and numbers and money, I found myself almost like an outsider dropping into behavioral health and seeing everything from a completely different point of view. And it inspired me to sort of connect these two worlds together and figure out some solutions to problems, I guess, and share it with the rest of the world.
Of course. Yeah, well, thank you so much for giving us that background. I always like to ask these questions because it gives us a little bit more of an insight as to where the book came from, right? So, yeah, thanks for giving us that background. With that being said, then, I think it's you got to kind of talk about the elephant in the room, or in this case, not an elephant, but a book, the one that's right there, the Solomon Project. I always like to talk about the cover design a little bit too. So, can you share a little bit about, did you design that yourself? Did somebody help you make that? I love the image there.
That's really interesting because what I wanted to do at one stage in the book, there's a wall that has to come down. And in this particular case, it breaks in half, and the people on the other side of the wall are coming back through the wall. So I don't want to give away too much because it's sort of I want it to stay a little bit of a mystery to those who want to read the book. Um, but yeah, the idea is sort of a change that's supposed to take place, and bringing walls down as part of that change, and sort of to capture in the image uh, the if you can imagine in life, things are going along fine, and then people drop into a pit, and then they come back out. And so, on sort of a more of a psychological level, you've got people sort of in hell down here, and they've fallen into this pit, and it's supposed to represent humanity is down at the bottom of a pit and needs to get out. And so I explained that to my son, and he said, "Boy, I don't get that at all, Dad." And I said, "Well, it's supposed to hit you on some deeper psychological level. So that's what I'm trying to do, mess with people a little bit with the cover. But that's kind of what it's supposed to represent."
Well, hey, I love that. And it also gives like a sneak peek as to what can be expected in the book too. I mean, for one, the event of itself, the wall in general, but also, the double meaning behind everything that I guess everyone else means expected to experience when they're reading it too. So let's chat about this a little bit more. I mean,
what is the Solomon Project actually within your story? And I think it's a biblical reference too. So tell me a little bit about that. I mean, why choose the Solomon Project?
Well, I felt that it's supposed to represent a major change and a major project and major investment, not only for the United States, but for the world. And when I grew up, there was the Apollo project. And I can remember thinking, I'm 62 years old. I was born in 63. So I can remember thinking when the Apollo project was over, I thought, this is so much fun. This is so interesting. What are we going to do next?
Mm.
Um, as I went along in life, I think it took me a whole year to realize there isn't going to be any new projects after the Apollo project. That was a one off. I was very disappointed. It took me a long time to actually figure this out.
Aw.
That that's not what we normally do is move from one project to another. So when I came up with this, I thought, well, this is on the scale of the Apollo project. So what will I call it? What will my character call it? And I wanted something not of mythology, but something biblical because there's a biblical connection to the whole story. So I just thought of King Solomon. He's an actual person in history, not just in the Bible, and known for wisdom. So there, put that together, and it's the Solomon Project. And whenever I tell anybody of the 70 titles I'm looking at, what do you think of this one? And somebody said, oh, the Solomon Project. That's good. So that's why I called it that.
Oh,
So
awesome. No, very cool stuff. And I also just like the way that you base that off the real event too. And I don't know too much about the Apollo project itself, but does it have any relation to what the Apollo project was about?
no, no. I
No.
mean,
Oh,
The Apollo Project was just the going to the moon. And
oh,
so
okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
and that's all right. That's all right.
Uh,
But to us back then, it was the Apollo project, and so that it was just that
got
was how people
it.
thought of it. So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, I like that. I like how you kind of gave it a fun twist also.
Okay.
But yeah, tell us a little bit more then about, the characters itself. I mean, there's, Adam and Jack, and they seem to have a pretty good dynamic there. I mean, one's a neurotypical genius, the other's a neurodiverse foster brother. Well, I guess what inspired you to create characters like that, and also how'd you develop their dynamic?
Um, Breaking Bad. I have to admit, I love
Okay.
the buddy aspect of Breaking Bad. Constant love hate, constant willingness of the two main characters to risk their lives for each other, even though they hate each other as much as they love each other. And I think that was the big draw of that show. And so I wanted to create that sort of buddy idea, but I wanted to take two parts of my own personality. Jack is sort of the, I don't know, when I was very young and before you get all the emotional turmoil of adolescence and the high school years, you're able to concentrate in an amazing way. And um, when I think of, there was a character on Love on the Spectrum. It's on Netflix, and there's a character named Mike. Well, a person, not a character. It's a real person, and he's autistic. And I just fell in love with that person, that character, and I thought he would be a great character in my book, a character based loosely on him. And that represents sort of the way I used to think. I was a real quiet, nerdy guy at lunch and would play games and the most detailed and difficult games. But then as we get older and the trauma of life takes over, that's more like the Adam character. Still very smart, but now so traumatized by really terrible things that happened in his life that it's almost like a young me, which is Jack, dealing with an older me, which is Adam. And so I decided to pit these characters sort of with and against each other throughout the story. And I didn't make them textbook good and evil. I read into a lot of philosophers since I've retired, and one philosopher said that evil is not us and them. The battle between good and evil resides in each of us. And so
Mm.
my characters have to identify the evil in themselves and the good in themselves. And while they're fighting with themselves, they can fight with each other and try to work it out that way. So it ended up being everybody seems to like the character interaction. So I think that's nice. That's great. I like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool because it seems like they're, I mean, as you mentioned, it's like they're battling inside themselves and in their dynamic as well. So it's kind of like an inner thoughts, outer thoughts type situation in a way, I guess you could say.
Right. At one point, Adam's character towards the middle of the story begins to turn dark, and other characters are talking to Jack and they say, "You need to call Adam." And Jack says, "No, the fight has to stay inside of Adam. If I take one side, he'll take the other side. So I'm just going to stay out of it and let the battle rage within him." And I've seen that happen in my own life, especially when you have kids. The kids start going in one direction, and if you participate in their decisions at all, they're going to take the opposite viewpoint. So you have to just let your kids alone sometimes when they're making difficult decisions, to battle it out inside themselves, not label you as the good guy and him as the bad guy. Or I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but that's been my experience with dealing with people. Let the battle reside within them. Don't take a side, or they'll have to take the opposite side. So, yeah.
Understood. No, thank you for sharing a little bit about that. And I think to all the authors listening today, there's something to be learned here. And the fact that, okay, your book can have a plot, it can have a setting, but when you have really strong characters like this, where Randy's thought about every aspect of it, their relationships and the inside and their inner conflicts, then it just makes the book even that more strong. So, kudos and thank you for sharing a little bit about that. And of course, it makes us all curious now because we want to know a little bit more about the characters and check out the book.
Good.
So yeah, but transitioning a bit into the writing aspect of everything, I'm sure there's a lot of research involved actually, especially because of Jack's condition. And I'm wondering, what kind of process you had for that. Was there a way that you fact checked or, anything along those lines?
No, not really very. I mean, I like I said, I watched the Love on the Spectrum show. It
Of
didn't
course.
certainly didn't make me an expert on autism. My grandson happens to be autistic, and I watched a film called Temple Grandin. Is about a woman that has
I love
autism.
that one. Yep.
Yeah, it's a very good story and true story. And so more just the average normal exposure to autism. Not, I'm certainly not an expert. Um, but I felt that I had watched it enough that I could write a character based on it. And you mentioned in a question that how did I make sure I didn't offend? I try to. I don't offend anybody. I'm very inoffensive. So I thought, well, if I'm insulting people with autism because I'm portraying Jack incorrectly, I'm doing the best I can. I think it's not.
Right.
It's not that all autistic people are alike. So it's my character, and I think that there are a lot of diverse behaviors inside of autism that nobody's going to say, well, nobody with autism would act like that, or you're being disrespectful. I didn't think that would be a problem. So
Yeah, no, I think you do. I mean, from what I could see, you do a great job with it regardless. So I like that. You never know what people might say though, but it's good that you kind of, you know, went wrong with that. And it's true that you have a very heartfelt connection to this character too. So it's great they did that. But more so than the characters, also some things we haven't touched upon is, all the thriller elements of the book. I think it's great that you really embed meaning into everything. I mean, the cover itself, for example, right? Tell us a little about that and how you embedded these like deep questions within the book and also move the plot along too. What was the process
um,
like?
sure.
Pointing
um,
all that out. Can
yeah,
you hear me?
I think that as far as the thriller elements, it's bringing real life events in to trip up the characters. So uh, you just need to maintain your touch on reality and also world build. So my book has celebrities, has singers, has authors, has old wise people all commenting on the entire story. So um, I think that showing the different plot elements from many points of view, old people, young people, people who definitely hate the idea of the Solomon Project, people who love the idea, and how there's extremes and how there's misinterpretations. And so as the world really works through understanding the Solomon Project and embracing or hating it, it allows the reader to sort of say, yeah, I agree with that. Oh, wait, I agree with him too. And then as the characters went along, I had the characters change their positions. And so I would create catalysts to allow them to say, you know what, I'm changing my position completely. I tried to label the Solomon Project as something that a naive hippie child would easily say, yes, that's terrific. So I had a naive hippie girl totally embraced the Solomon Project. She had a peace sign tattooed on her face, but then she had her heart broken. And her father kept saying, I told you it would happen. Your heart would get broken and somebody would hurt you bad enough. And all of a sudden, you would see the world in a very different way. And you would see the Solomon Project as being very naive and stupid. And so she went from being somebody that supported the Solomon Project to somebody who did not believe the Solomon Project was correct. Which the Solomon Project is a movement to address all of our everyday crazy. So not just the big stuff like bipolar or um, uh, borderline personality or schizophrenia, but the everyday crazy that we have: alcoholism, addiction, gambling, all of the things that are constantly impacting us, causing us to not be able to be our best selves, things that probably we could use some help to fix. Maybe it's chemicals that are interfering with how we think. Maybe it's childhood injury, brain injury, or something like that. Trauma, certainly. And I've had people in my life that have been traumatized, that have become addicted. And my best friend died from alcohol addiction. He just finally, one day they just found him, and that was heartbreaking. And that's a very difficult thing to find yourself dealing with. And when I was in behavioral health in the government, one of the departments that I was in charge of, or financially in charge of, was the drug and alcohol treatment in my county. And it, I won't say it's not up to the task, but it sure could do a lot more to have a higher success rate than it does. And I was there during the epidemic, OxyContin epidemic, and that's how my friend got started in abuse. Was he was prescribed OxyContin for his back, and he had a traumatic child family event, and so when they got him off of OxyContin, he went on to alcohol, and he would come to
Mm.
my house already drunk. We would usually have a few beers. I mean, he was already drunk by the time he got here, and it
Mm.
just got worse and worse for years. And finally, he got help, got cleaned up, but then it didn't take much to throw him right back into it again. And finally, he just drank himself to death. And I've had other family members that have had issues where you just think, well, if you have an appendicitis, you go in and they remove your appendicitis and the problem is solved. Well, when you have a family member that has an addiction or some other kind of problem, you just think, oh, well, you'll go to the counseling, you'll go to a psychiatrist, you'll be fine. They'll give you medication. Oh, no, it's not that way at all. I mean, I don't know if you have people that are into these kinds of problems, but they're basically, they're all around me. I'm a landlord, so I have a lot of tenants. Some of them have some problems, and it's just such a dominant issue in our society. One character in my book is a like a college professor, and he says, you know, what happens if really advanced aliens come down, land on our planet, and take us back to their planet? And when we get there, their planet is filled with insane asylums and all sorts of prisons and things like that. Won't we ask them the question, why are you exploring space when you haven't figured out how to solve these behavioral problems? And in my opinion, and that's the Solomon Project, is basically focusing everything on solving all of these behavior problems, having answers, better education system, better parenting courses on parenting and how to be a good parent, things like that. And I see a time coming where if we don't address this, we are going to have a situation where technology is going to enable very bad people to do things that right now we believe that policing and detection and things like that can stop these terrible things from happening. But at the end of the day, what stops terrible things from happening is most people in the world are sane and good. But we do have a pretty good percentage that aren't. What happens when, am I going on too long, Danielle?
Hey, please keep going. This is important for us to know more, especially because it's a big part of like where the book's coming from, So please go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay. So I definitely think technologically we're going in a direction where, of course, we can have a president that pushes a button and launches nuclear weapons and ends the world. We've known that, but he's constrained by government and bureaucracy. But we've had a couple of events that really are very scary. One, QAnon and the predecessor to QAnon was a computer virus. And basically, a bunch of hackers getting out there and influencing the dialogue that was going on the internet, having a tremendous influence, and it went bad. If you watch the entire story of QAnon and where it came from, and all of that stuff that happened on January 6th and the 2020 election, a lot of it had to do with a few individuals starting off as do-gooders, and it kind of turned sideways. And that's a very interesting story. But then you've also got COVID-19. So you've got some guy in China who basically they're doing some experimentations that got away from him, and it left the lab. So we're getting closer and closer with technology to where one individual who could deliberately do something terrible, you're going to say, well, you're going to stop him with regulations. We're going to stop him with detection and law enforcement. And you're going to stop him with that. There's going to come a point where you can't. And my story is set in 2055 because if someone created a computer virus right now, they could do some damage. But in 2055, my world is set in a time when police are robots, the army is the military is robotic, and factories are robotic. So if one person killed everybody, you could have the factories making yachts and growing food and do whatever he needs. There's going to be robots and factories working for him. He doesn't need anybody else. So he could use these robots to just annihilate everybody. But he would need a computer virus to do it. And virtual is an interaction you mentioned in your questions about virtual and AI. You're going to need to have that better interface with computers than we do now. And you're going to have a lot of robots in order to really set us up for a sort of quiet apocalypse or quietly placing the fate of humanity in the lap of a Bond villain. And it'll just be a very much more dangerous thing. And how are you going to stop that? You've got to make us all so that there are very, very few crazy people out there. Right now, there's just too many criminal minds, too many damaged people, too many psychopaths, too many sociopaths, too much mainstreaming of that kind of thought and behavior. And we just have never addressed it. And it's a very unaddressed situation compared to all the advancements we're making and everything else. How are we not addressing this in a much more deliberate and in an intentional way? So that's what the book is about. And
Yeah. No, sorry, I agree. I mean, I think it's so deep and so like it's funny because somebody could probably read your book and think it's just a story about two people, but there's so much more going on here that you're really ingrained in just facts and real time recurrent events and things that I think people do need to, open their eyes to. So it's very important. It's very noble what you're doing too. So thank you so
oh,
much for
thanks. But we'll see. Maybe it'll make a difference. A little difference would be nice. I did, when I retired 7 years ago, I had a long period of time where I spent a lot of time reading philosophers. And I was very surprised to see a theme, and Adorno called it everyday insanity, I think. But there were several philosophers that basically said that our problem is this everyday insanity, this common everyday obsession with conspiracies and weird things, the ways that people think. I have certain friends that they lie all the time. You have to fact check everything they say, and you just think, why do some people do that and some people don't? And you just think, well, there's got to be a way that we can kind of get to the bottom of some of this behavior and and try to have some way to fix it, because it feels like it's having a worse impact now. And it could be related to the freedom of the press as far as the internet is concerned, the fact that it's just filters are almost impossible now. So everybody is unfiltered going on Facebook saying all manner of crazy things. And so it almost seems like everyday insanity has gotten a real boost with the internet. And so now these philosophers that said it's a problem, their worst nightmares are coming true, and we're wrestling with it quite a bit. And I do firmly believe that addressing this will pay big dividends. Very important. So the book is all about a time coming where it has to be addressed. Like, we could probably get away with another 10 years of not addressing it, but pretty soon it's gonna be a crisis. So,
Yeah, no, definitely. And so there you go. All you could do is spread the word about it, right? And kind of open people's eyes. So all this being said, I'm wondering if we could, as we begin to wrap up the show, if we have any tips for the writers out there, because this is an author's podcast, and we'd love to know a little bit about, your writing process, perhaps any tips and tricks that helped you as you were creating the book, especially because it has such deep meaning. There's got to be some process that you followed for getting it down on the paper.
first thing I did was a friend told me, you want to make a movie? Why don't you make a movie about this basement game that you and your friends play? So just go down and we make a maze in the basement, and it's sort of a Halloween game that we play with the kids. And I said, it's just a blast. It's so much fun. He said, make a movie about that. I said, well, I need to have a haunted something in this room with me. I just found a box. I put the box down in the basement, and I thought, okay, well, it's got to be haunted. How am I going to, what's it going to be? Well, if this is going to be a movie that's going to have any success, I need a franchise. And I'm getting to the answer to your question. Now, I really honestly am. But uh, so I need a franchise. Why not Christianity, the Bible? Let's let Raiders of the Lost Ark used it. I'm going to use the Bible, but the the Ark of the Covenant's already been taken. So what I'll do is I'll make a fictional box made out of the sticks from the tree of knowledge. And so it's a hidden artifact, but every time you open it, some new piece of knowledge is there. And so it's been lost from history. And this box winds up in my basement, starts haunting the basement and all this sort of thing. Well, the bottom line is I made a movie. It was a lot of fun. I gave it to someone who was in the movie business, and he said, they have courses on how to write a script. I think your script is needs some work. So the number one thing you do is, as a writer and having a writing process, you have to write a lot and you have to fail a lot and you have to do a lousy job. And then you have to have somebody tell you that it's lousy. And then you have to start over again. And you have to do that several times. That's how I think that's the most valuable thing I can think of when it comes, and also be autobiographical. You have to write about things in your life. My rule was, I'm not going to graduate with a degree in English and at the age of 20 decide I'm going to write the next great novel. I'm going to be 60 and I'm going to have a whole bunch of life experience to write about. And I think a lot of writers, it seems like they read a lot and then they turn around and try to write. And it's like, well, is what you're reading fiction? Are you taking fiction and making your own fiction? Or do you have life experience and are you writing about that? So for me, I think it has to be autobiographical. I think you have to write a lot, and I think you have to fail a lot, and be honest about yourself when you're not doing a good job and you have to start over. So that's my process.
Understood. No, and hey, you did see me yawn, but it's only because I'm actually narcoleptic. I am, so I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
won't
I
say
know,
that's a
but
good
what you're
thing.
saying is very important stuff that a lot of authors could definitely benefit from. So thank you for that. And I
Oh,
like what you
sure.
said about having to kind of like, especially the reading. People don't always think that it's that connected, but it is, right? It's something that helps you to their life experiences or what you're reading, and it all goes to, pile up and be part of your writing process. So it's super important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all that being said, I mean, this has been a really cool conversation. I think that people are going to really have their eyes opened by reading the Solomon Project. But that being said, though, there's got to be a way for people to connect with you if they're interested in learning a little bit more about you or staying up to date with future projects. Where is the best place people can go and check out your material?
I have a website. It's called Randy Swank Authors, I think. Randy Swank Author. Oh boy. And certainly Randy Swank Author on Facebook is a way for them to connect, and there'll be more information there. So, oh, here it
Awesome.
is. Randy Swank Author is the website. Randy Swank Author, one word.com.
Awesome. Okay, we'll make sure to put that in the description box of this podcast today. So when we finish, everyone, you can click on over, you can get connected, you can stay up to date, and of course, go and check out the Solomon Project. A lot of stuff we need to learn for today's day and age. So go do it and get immersed in the world. Randy, this has been a really fun conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Danielle. This was great. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. And to all of our listeners out there, if you are inspired by Randy's work, he has a great approach to character development, a great approach to weaving in important themes into his book. So take his as a guide when you go ahead and write your own books. So until next time, keep writing, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.